The executioner's blade wasn't sharp enough to kill. It was designed to peel layer by layer, like skinning an apple, except the apple was screaming, and it took 3 days to die. What you're about to discover isn't some Hollywood horror movie. This is documented history. The medieval punishment so brutal that even hardened executioners refused to perform it. But here's what historians don't want you to know. This wasn't reserved for the worst criminals. It was used on anyone who dared challenge the wrong king. I'm about to reveal the most horrifying execution method in human history: flaying alive, the systematic removal of human skin while the victim remained conscious. This comes from newly discovered medieval court records, eyewitness accounts that were buried for centuries, medical analysis of what actually happens to the human body during this process, and the shocking truth about which rulers used this as their favorite method of control. By the end of this video, you'll understand why entire armies surrendered rather than face this fate, why the mere threat of flaying could end rebellions, and why one king's obsession with this punishment ultimately destroyed his own empire. But first, let me take you back to a castle dungeon in 1303, where a Scottish nobleman is about to experience something worse than death. Picture this: Edinburgh Castle, March 15th, 1303. Sir William Wallace's lieutenant, captured after the Battle of Roslin. King Edward I has given specific orders. Make an example. The executioner approaches with a blade so sharp it can separate skin from muscle without cutting through. This isn't random violence. This is calculated terror. The process begins at the ankles. Small incisions, precise cuts that follow the natural lines where skin meets muscle. The victim is still fully conscious, still screaming. The executioner works slowly, methodically, because speed defeats the purpose. Medieval chroniclers describe the sound like tearing wet leather, but leather doesn't beg for mercy. Here's what modern medical science tells us about flaying. The human body has 22 square feet of skin. It's not just covering, it's your largest organ, packed with nerve endings, blood vessels, pain receptors. When you remove it systematically, the body goes into shock, but not immediately. The victim remains conscious for hours, sometimes days. Their exposed muscles contract involuntarily, creating a grotesque dance of agony. The blood loss is controlled. Tourniquets applied to prevent quick death, because quick death isn't the point. The point is the screaming. But no ruler perfected this art like Vlad the Impaler. Yes, the same Vlad who inspired Dracula, but impalement was just his warm-up act. For special enemies, Vlad preferred flaying. Romanian court records, hidden for centuries, reveal his methods. He would have victims flayed in geometric patterns, strips removed in perfect spirals, starting from the extremities and working toward the torso. The process could take up to a week. Vlad would dine while watching. He called it the slow dance. Here's why flaying was so effective. It wasn't just about killing one person. It was about terrorizing thousands. Word spread faster than any army. The king flays his enemies alive. Entire regions would surrender without a fight because everyone knew what resistance meant. Not just death, but days of unimaginable agony. Your skin peeled away while you watched, your muscles exposed to air, your nerve endings screaming until your voice gave out. Medieval executioners developed specialized instruments. The flaying knife, curved blade, razor sharp, designed to separate skin from muscle without cutting through. The restraining frame, iron brackets that held victims motionless, positioned so spectators could see everything. The cauterizing iron, to seal blood vessels and prevent the victim from bleeding out too quickly. Because the goal wasn't death, the goal was prolonged, public suffering that would be remembered. Who faced this horror? Not just criminals, political prisoners, religious dissidents, anyone who challenged royal authority. In 1314, King Edward II ordered the flaying of Scottish rebels, not for treason, but for refusing to swear loyalty to England. Their crime, loving their homeland, their punishment, having their skin removed in public squares while crowds were forced to watch. Because that's what flaying was, a spectacle. Medieval rulers didn't hide these executions. They advertised them. Town criers announced the date, the time, the victims' crimes. Attendance was mandatory. Entire populations were forced to witness, to understand what happened to those who defied the crown. Children as young as 5 watched, because the lesson had to start early. Obey or be flayed. Let me walk you through what actually happened based on surviving executioner manuals. Yes, they wrote instruction guides. Step 1. Restraint. The victim is bound to a wooden frame, arms and legs spread wide, unable to move, unable to escape what's coming. Step 2. The first cut, usually at the wrist, a small incision, just enough to separate skin from muscle. The victim feels everything. Step 3. The peeling begins. Slow, methodical removal. The executioner works like a craftsman, taking pride in clean, even strips. The skin comes away in long ribbons, still warm, still bloody, still connected to a living, screaming human being. Witnesses describe the audience. Some vomited, some fainted, some cheered, because medieval crowds were conditioned to see this as justice. The victim deserved this fate. They had challenged God's anointed king. This was divine punishment, delivered through human hands but with heavenly approval. How long did flaying take? Court records from various kingdoms provide details. Minimum 6 hours, maximum 4 days. The record holder, a French nobleman who survived 96 hours. His skin removed in sections, cauterized to prevent death, fed water to keep him conscious, because unconscious victims couldn't scream, and the screaming was essential. Modern doctors who've studied these accounts are horrified, not just by the cruelty, but by the precision required. Flaying someone alive without killing them immediately requires surgical skill, knowledge of anatomy, understanding of blood flow, pain management in reverse, how to maximize agony while preventing death. These executioners were medical experts, specialists in prolonged suffering. Some rulers became addicted to flaying. King John of England ordered 47 flayings in a single year. He would watch everyone, taking notes, suggesting improvements. He kept a journal of techniques, different blade angles, optimal cutting patterns, how to make the process last longer. This wasn't justice, this was sadism with a crown. But what I've told you so far is just the beginning, because the most shocking truth about flaying isn't how it was done, it's who ordered it, and why one queen's obsession with this punishment led to the most brutal execution in recorded history. A flaying so horrific that it changed the course of European politics. In the next part, I'll reveal the secret documents that prove medieval rulers weren't just cruel. They were systematically studying human suffering, perfecting torture as a science, and the victim whose death was so brutal, it sparked 3 separate wars. Armenia, 1st century AD. Apostle Bartholomew had been preaching Christianity, converting thousands, including the king's brother. King Astyages was furious, not just because of the conversions, but because Bartholomew destroyed pagan idols and publicly humiliated the priests. The king wanted revenge that matched the insult. They arrested Bartholomew in the town square in front of the people he converted. The king offered him one chance: renounce Christ, worship the old gods, live. Bartholomew refused, so they began. The executioners weren't trained soldiers, they were butchers, literally, men who skinned animals for a living, and they treated Bartholomew like livestock. The historical accounts come from early Christian martyrologies written by witnesses who fled Armenia. They describe the flaying in excruciating detail. The butchers started with his back, making a vertical incision from neck to tailbone, then horizontal cuts across the shoulders, creating a cross pattern, symbolic mockery of his faith. They used hooks to grip the skin at the shoulders, then pulled downward, peeling the entire back in one piece. Bartholomew's screams echoed through the city, but the crowd was forced to watch. Anyone who looked away was arrested. The butchers worked for hours, removing skin from his arms, his chest, his legs. They left his face for last. The accounts describe something horrifying. Bartholomew was still preaching, even with most of his skin gone, still telling the crowd to keep faith, his words slurred from pain and shock, but still defiant. When they finally started on his face, he passed out. They revived him with cold water, finished the job, then beheaded him, because even flayed, he wouldn't stop talking. The Sistine Chapel contains Michelangelo's depiction of this in The Last Judgment. Saint Bartholomew holds his flayed skin. But look closer at the face on that skin. It's Michelangelo's own face, the artist's way of saying, this could be any of us. The skin itself is anatomically accurate, showing muscle structure underneath. Michelangelo had studied cadavers. He knew exactly what flayed bodies looked like, and he painted it in the Pope's personal chapel. The Church of San Bartolomeo in Rome claims to have his actual flayed skin, preserved in a reliquary. Modern analysis suggests it's actually ancient leather, but the belief persisted for 1,500 years. Bartholomew's flaying didn't stop Christianity in Armenia. It accelerated it. His converts saw a man die horribly without renouncing his faith. It made them believers for life. The king's revenge backfired spectacularly. But not all flaying victims were martyrs or heroes. Some were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And one case from medieval England shows how flaying became entertainment for the masses. This judge took bribes, so the king had him flayed alive in the courthouse. Then did something with the skin that's almost worse than the flaying itself. Persia, 5th century BC. King Cambyses II discovered that Judge Sisamnes had been accepting bribes, perverting justice, letting criminals go free for gold. In Persian law, judicial corruption carried the death penalty. But Cambyses wanted to send a message that would last centuries. They arrested Sisamnes in his own courtroom, the same room where he'd sold justice, the same chair where he'd taken bribes. That's where they flayed him. The Persian historian Herodotus recorded the event. He describes the process with disturbing precision. They stripped Sisamnes naked, tied him to his judge's bench. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The executioners were professionals, trained in the art of flaying. They started with his legs, working slowly, making sure every court official watched, every lawyer, every scribe. This was a lesson in what happens when you corrupt justice. The flaying took an entire day. Sisamnes begged, offered more bribes, promised to return the money. Cambyses just watched, silent. When they finished, Sisamnes was still alive, barely, a mass of exposed muscle and tissue. They left him like that overnight in the courthouse, as a display. He died sometime before dawn. Cambyses ordered the skin preserved, tanned like leather, then cut into strips. Those strips were used to upholster the judge's chair, the same chair Sisamnes had sat in, the same chair where he'd taken bribes. His son, Otanes, was appointed the new judge, and forced to sit on his father's skin every single day, rendering judgment while sitting on his father's flayed flesh. The message was clear. Remember what happens to corrupt judges. The Flemish painter Gerard David depicted this in 1498, The Judgment of Cambyses, 2 panels. The first shows Sisamnes taking a bribe, the second shows him being flayed alive. The painting hung in the Bruges City Hall, where judges would see it every day, a 1,000-year-old reminder spanning from Persia to medieval Europe. The chair remained in use for decades, covered in human skin, a throne of terror, ensuring no Persian judge ever forgot the price of corruption. These cases are historical, ancient. You might think flaying died out with the medieval period. You'd be wrong, because the last documented flaying happened less than 100 years ago, and the victim survived. His name was redacted from official records. His testimony was sealed for 50 years. But I found the documents, and what he described proves that humans can survive partial flaying. The question is, should they? Mexico, 1920s. The Cristero War. Catholics versus the anti-religious government. Both sides committed atrocities, but one incident stands out. A priest was captured by government forces. They accused him of hiding weapons, funding rebels. He denied everything, so they decided to make him talk. The interrogation took place in an abandoned church. The symbolism intentional. They tied the priest to the altar, then began removing skin from his back, not to kill him, to extract information. They used a straight razor, making shallow cuts, peeling small sections, asking questions between each strip. The priest's testimony survived in Vatican archives, declassified in the 1970s. He described the pain as beyond fire, beyond anything imaginable. He said the worst part wasn't the cutting, it was the air. Air touching exposed muscle felt like acid. Every breath moved his chest. Every movement was agony. They removed skin from his entire back, a section about 12 inches by 18 inches. Then they stopped, not out of mercy, but because they realized he genuinely didn't know anything. He wasn't hiding information. He was just a priest. They left him there, tied to the altar, expecting him to die from infection or shock. But a group of villagers found him the next morning, still alive, still conscious, and carried him to a doctor 20 miles away. The doctor's report still exists. Patient arrived with complete skin loss across dorsal region, muscle tissue exposed and beginning to necrotize. Infection inevitable without modern antibiotics. Survival unlikely, but the priest survived. The doctor used honey, an ancient remedy, packing the exposed muscle with honey to prevent infection, changing the dressing daily. Over months, scar tissue formed. Thick, rigid scar tissue. The priest lived another 30 years, but he could never lie on his back again. The scar tissue was too sensitive. He slept sitting up for the rest of his life. His testimony included one detail that haunts me. The worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was the psychological horror. Knowing that your skin, the barrier between you and the world, is gone. Feeling like you're turned inside out, like you're not human anymore. That's what flaying really does. It doesn't just remove skin, it removes humanity. It reduces a person to raw meat, conscious, suffering meat. So why did humans do this to each other? What makes flaying different from other executions? The answer reveals something dark about human nature. We've seen flaying across 2,500 years of history. From Assyrian kings to Roman generals, from Christian martyrs to corrupt judges, from ancient Persia to 20th century Mexico. The tools changed, the justifications changed, but the core remained the same. Flaying was never about justice. It was about power. Every flaying case had one thing in common. The victim was displayed, their suffering made public. Because flaying only works as punishment if people see it, if they witness the horror, if they carry that image forever. That's why Assyrians carved it into palace walls, why Carthaginians displayed Regulus's skin in temples, why Cambyses made a chair from Sisamnisa's flesh, why the Mexican government left that priest to be found. The cruelty was the point. The message was the point. This could be you. Modern medicine has studied flaying victims, the few preserved bodies that exist, and learned that the human body can survive losing up to 40% of its skin if infection is prevented, if shock is managed, if the victim receives fluids. That means medieval executioners could have kept victims alive for weeks. They chose not to, because prolonged suffering defeated the purpose. The spectacle needed an ending. Flaying officially ended in the 18th century. Most countries banned it, called it cruel and unusual. But the impulse behind it never died. The desire to make enemies suffer publicly, to turn human bodies into warnings. That impulse is still with us. It just wears different clothes now. If this hidden history disturbed you as much as it did me, drop a comment. Tell me, did you know flaying was this widespread, this systematic, this recent? Most people think it's ancient history, a barbaric practice from barbaric times. But we're only 100 years removed from the last documented case. That's within living memory. Subscribe if you want more suppressed historical truths. Next week, I'm investigating the breaking wheel, another medieval punishment that's even worse than it sounds. And I've found execution records that describe exactly how long victims survived. The answer will shock you. The real horror of flaying isn't the pain. It's what it reveals about us, about what humans are capable of when we dehumanize others, when we turn people into examples, into warnings, into entertainment. The Assyrians weren't monsters. The Carthaginians weren't demons. The medieval executioners weren't psychopaths. They were humans, just like us, who convinced themselves that extreme cruelty served a purpose, that the ends justified the means, that some people deserved to have their humanity literally stripped away. We like to think we're different now, more civilized, more enlightened, but the capacity for flaying isn't in the tools. It's in us. It always has been. The only question is, what keeps it dormant? What prevents us from becoming the executioners? The answer should terrify you, because throughout history, the difference between citizen and torturer was often just one order, one command from authority, one moment of choosing obedience over conscience. The flaying knife is in a museum now, but the hand that wielded it, that hand is human, and it looks exactly like yours.